I was there for like, I think, a month and a half. And I was there from like July to near the end of August. And here's Max. And it was me and Max. And I happened to be room 409, which was really weird because room 409, or the 409 was basically the exact amount plus some change as the room rate. So when I was there, this nonsense kept going on. And at the Grove, it had been sexual a few times, and here and at the Woodspring, it was, painful a lot of times, and then they started turning it sexual again. There were even the times where I was walking around the hotel, like a few blocks away from the hotel, and I felt like I was suddenly like high, and I like dropped to my knees, and I almost thought it was very hot outside, and I don't think I was having heat stroke, but they kept doing it, and I kept feeling like a rush that was like nonstop and growing, and I was like, I think I'm gonna have a heat stroke, guys. We need to stop this. And there were a few times in the hotel when I was masturbating, and then they added their electricity to it, and it felt really good. It's just the fact that I don't want to be stimulated by terrorists, and that's better than the torture, the other torture, but it's still torture, and it's still non-consensual, and it's still not desirable, and it's still fucked up. One incident that happened there was, and this is very important because this is an example of how they can fuck with your, events and your perceptions and make other people seem like they're sketchy, and they may be, but you're not necessarily sure of it. And in this case, it was the maintenance man, and I felt one thing that one day they were doing this thing that they had done before all the way back to the Studio 6, where I felt like my insides were turning, like, and I felt like something was on the floor below me in 309, like on the roof, like grinding against the roof of the ceiling. And so I went down to, I was getting real agitated because it was just annoying. It's just like when they do these certain things to you, like you can't sit still, and you can't just, sometimes you can take it, but then other times it's just violating, and it's horrible. And even if it's not painful, sometimes it's very uncomfortable, and it's very unpleasant. And I went down there, and the maintenance guy was, right when I was getting to the room, the maintenance guy came into the room. It was a vacant room. It didn't seem to, at a glance, it didn't seem to be in need of repair of anything. I don't know why he went in there, so I don't know if there was anything in there. Probably not. It was probably just their ways of fucking with my perception. I don't know if he was in on anything at all, but at the time, I certainly thought so. I eventually got kicked out of there because they kept annoying me so much by talking to me and zapping me and all that stuff. But one day they were talking to me, and I tried to not hear them by taking something. It wasn't bubble wrap, but it was something kind of like a saran wrap from packaging from a package that I had gotten. And I was like rubbing it together, and so it was creating like this squeaky whiny sound. And then I guess the hotel's staff had asked them to leave. I did have an outburst early on, like a week or two into the hotel stay. They talked to me about it, and everything was okay after that, where I went on like this diatribe where like they had taken me through like a whole story time thing. And I thought like a couple of friends were coming to pick me up, and I was going to be free from all this. And I went and did like this big diatribe, possibly, verbatim from what they were speaking, through me or whatever. But then, and the second incident wasn't really an outburst, but they asked me to leave. This girl named Carrie came to me, a lady named Carrie came to my door, and I was all agitated and stuff, and I wouldn't really talk to her, and she called the cops for some reason, and they asked me to leave. And I went to my storage unit with Max down near Techno Ridge, which is somewhat near MLK and 183. And I actually walked and lied down and like took like a little nap on the lawn outside where some of the Travis County detectives were. and I was planning on talking to them the next day. But I eventually, when the dawn hit, I got a cab and I got some stuff from out of storage and took Max to another hotel, the Motel 6, over near IH-35 and 51st Street. And I stayed there for a couple of days. And they played a-ha's Take On Me over and over and over and over and over again. It was beyond annoying. One thing of note at the Motel 6, this would have been around the end of August or the beginning of September of 2018. You'll notice in one of those videos that I have posted, I'm pretty sure I posted this one. If not, I'll be sure to post it. You'll see on the ceiling, it looks like there's like waves, like little waves of light, like almost like when you're recording like an old CRT monitor, and if you're recording it with a camera, and you see like those little lines because they're not in the same frame rate or sync rate. It's kind of like that, even with the TV off, on the ceiling. Like I saw waves of shadows or waves of light on that. Now, when you look at that on the camera, people probably wouldn't notice that, but it's very important that you look at that, and I'll try to link that in this video description. But it's very important that you look at that because I saw that with my eyes. Nothing could have caused that in the room or outside of the room. That was one of their stupid projection thing that they were doing. It was just constant, like over the ceiling, just like this wave of light or shadows of lines. I got fed up, and then I fled town. I took out Max, and I did have a court date coming up. But I was planning on going just to Chicago. But first I just drove north. I drove all the way to Oklahoma City. I stayed in, I think, a Motel 6 there, too, for a few days. They were still there talking to me. The torture was not there as much, if at all. I don't remember any, if much, physical pain on that, but the voices were still there. They were a lot quieter, but that doesn't mean anything because they can just turn the volume down. And then I went, after a few days there, I attempted to drive to Chicago, and I texted my friend Robbie like when I was like 6 or 8 hours away from there, and he said he was in Tennessee visiting his family, and I was like, shit. And then I also had the court date, so I turned around to go make my court date, even though I eventually missed it anyway because it's nonsense. But I made it all the way to Mount Vernon, Missouri, and that's where I turned around, or that's where I got a hotel room. But I turned around, I think in Mount Vernon is where I turned around, and I got a hotel room either a few hours back from there, or I got a hotel room in Mount Vernon, and I had turned back like further towards Chicago in Missouri. And I don't recall hearing any voices that night. I don't know if I lost them. I don't know if they had to recharge their devices. I don't know if they decided to go back to Austin. But I do know that other friends of mine that were going through this nonsense and hearing them also moved away and stopped hearing the voices. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case for me coming down to McAllen. It's only a few hours away. They followed me to Oklahoma City. They followed me here. I don't know if they're planning on following me to Chicago or not. But it was like one of the last nights that I remember it being quiet. And then I came back and I stayed with a friend for a few days. No, I stayed at the Motel 6 for a few days. I went to a friend's house. I missed my court date because I was arguing with them all day. They do this thing where they try to make you think it's over. They escalate things in these narratives when using the soundboard, and it makes you think that it's over. Because first of all, how could people be that ridiculously cruel? And like eventually there has to be a breaking point. And then they also point out all like these coincidences and things that aren't coincidences, but things that they fabricate. And some of the artist coincidences that they fabricate. And then they turn it into to make you think that, oh, your dad knows it's about to be over. Oh, he's going to rescue you. Oh, everyone knows. Oh, it's going to be over. It's going to be over. And then like you get to the point where you're like, I'm not going to my court date. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to do this because it's over. I want my money. I want my disability. I want my unemployment. I want my wrongful termination thing. They act like they're working on all of this because they argue sometimes when they're not, they're still torturing me, but they go through and they have this advocacy phase where they like argue like everything because they've been in my life all those years fucking with me. Even when I didn't know they were there. They were there when I lost my job. They were there when I was with Bernie and he went crazy. And they even point those out all the time. And sometimes they point out the cruelties, like, oh, isn't it so sad? Yeah. And it like, doesn't it suck that that my Constantine fucked you over and like gave a PowerPoint of a presentation of ideas that were your ideas back to you and Sam, your office mate. Doesn't that suck? Yeah, doesn't that suck? And then he was on the soundboard for a little bit, acting like a proponent, like he had acting like everybody was meeting. And, but those are just some examples of like what they do. Oops, sorry, Max. What they do to make you think things are about to be over and resolved, and that you don't have to meet your normal obligations that you wouldn't have to meet if it weren't for these people, and if these people were caught or came forward. So I stayed at a friend's place for a few days after the Motel 6 after I missed my court date. This is in September. And then he had some family and friends coming into town. So I went to the Wyndham near 71 and IH-35. I stayed there for one night. I was hoping to sneaking Max into the pool. And then they were nonstop. And they were also agitating me. I didn't have any drugs on me. If I had any drugs on me, if I wanted drugs, I could have gotten drugs, but I didn't want any. I wasn't using any drugs that night. I wasn't using drugs that frequently. I was using it sometimes to escape from this nonsense and to stop from going crazy or from getting to a really bad point because they try to drive people to hurt themselves or hurt other people. And I didn't want to be in that place. They also push you to that point because they torture you, or they tortured me, and then they would stop doing that, usually, if I used. And sometimes they would even say that, well, if you use, we'll stop torturing you. And then they still torture you, but it's like, sometimes it's like sexual and it feels good, but then sometimes they still torture you and bother you, but it's usually not at the level that it was before. And then they use that against you a couple days later when they arrest you. But I was at the Wyndham, and I think the Bill Maher show was on, and I was actually crying in my bed, and I just was trying to cuddle with Max, and I just wanted to be left alone. And they kept bothering me and bothering me and bothering me, and I kept going in there. I would take smoke breaks, and I would be like, "Shut the fuck up! Like, leave me alone!" And then eventually the hotel staff called the police, and then I was evicted from that place that night. And I was driving with Max in the car up 35, and I was trying to play chicken with them. And I did this on the way coming back to town a little bit too at one point. But like, you get to the point where you're like, surely there's going to be a stopping point with these people where they're going to be like, this is too much. We've gone too far. We have to stop this. Whatever this is, we have to stop it. These people don't do that. They love it. They love pushing people beyond that point. So I was like braking and like stopping and braking and stopping. And then I finally got off the freeway, and then like I slammed on the brakes really hard and then Max slid off the passenger seat into the carpet or to this floor, and he'd hit the glove compartment box. Not too bad, but like it freaked me out. And I got around the car, and I was sobbing, and I picked Max up, and there was a cop car that pulled up behind me. I got in the car, and I drove off. I didn't want to deal with the cops because of what had happened the last time the cops fucked me over. Ended up in a slow speed car chase on 35 that got reduced to attempted evading, which is still a felony, which is surprising. And they planted drugs on me, which they were so kind to drop those charges. But they planted like 1.5 grams on me. I did not have any drugs on me. That cop's going to regret doing that, planting those drugs on me. I don't know if it was the cop that wrote the report up. I assume it was, but we'll find out, and he'll fucking regret that. But he planted drugs on me, and and my bag was packed with suitcases, like the back seat was with bags, suitcases, bins, because I was like living at hotels, so it's like I had stuff to like live off. It's like kind of like a one-bedroom apartment worth of stuff, sort of. And so it's like the first and only bag that you search just happens to have the drugs in it that I didn't have. Like, that's fucking bullshit, and you know it. He's gonna get what's coming to him, and they said that through me, but he'll regret that. And it was probably one of the kindest arrests that I had. They were actually pretty kind. One weird thing that they did is when they were driving me downtown around Hancock Center, they looped around an airport in the neighborhood catty corner across it, and then they stopped in Hancock Center in the Sears parking lot, and they just stopped for a few minutes and opened the car, and he asked me, why are you doing this? And I think I said something like, I'm just tired of being fucked with, or something like that. And I asked for the cuffs to be taken off, and he said he wouldn't. And by the way, Austin police, you do not have to cuff every single person that you put in the back of your cop car. What's the point of the cuffs anyway? You put the cuffs on the person, and then you put them in the car. Then you take the person out of the car, and you have a shield on it so they can't get into the front. And then you take them to the jail, and then you take them out of the car and unhandcuff them. So you're handcuffing them for a few feet, and it's very uncomfortable to have your handcuffed behind your back, especially when you're sitting in the back of the cop car. Can you at least handcuff our hands and like in front of us, like in the front, instead of like behind us? That's very uncomfortable. And it's like, if the person's not like resisting, like, why cuff them at all? What are you protecting? Like, you're not like, what, during the ride they're going to do something? You have a shield back there. They can't do anything. They could still kick. I mean, it's like they could still do as much damage. Having your arms doesn't really allow you to do much back there. When they took me downtown, they put me in a cell because I think I kicked my shoes off. I was just pissed off. I just kicked them a few feet. And they're like, And so they put me in a cell. They put me in a padded cell downtown, which, by the way, 99% of the people that you put in a padded cell downtown do not need to be put in a padded cell. I was not thinking about hurting myself or anybody else. I was complying with everything, even though I was in a bitchy mood. And I was still like, I wasn't yelling. I was like, I want my dog and I want to go. I did like slap like my shoe against like the wall or something to get their attention. But it's like, that doesn't mean you need to put someone in a padded cell. What does a padded cell do versus a regular cell? There's no point to that. They just do that to fuck with you, because they can throw you in there naked and give you like a little blanket. Or like this little Velcro mini skirt looking thing that's like your blanket, and it's not even like a full size blanket. You can't even cover yourself. Your legs aren't covered. In the padded cell, they started taking me through like the whole narrative thing, acting like my dad was there to get me out, and like during this supposed to be car chase, they were like, yeah, you finally got to be in like a car chase, like, in this fun, we just want to have like one last fun time with you. Like, they were the cops, and they probably are. But downtown, they were like, they did this whole narrative, and they had the soundboard too, as if my dad was coming to pick me up, and like all the charges were going to be dropped, and blah blah blah. And then I was in the cell, and all of a sudden, like, I felt like this thing, like I felt like it was like moving like through my body, and when it hit, it was like, ugh! And when it hit my throat, I literally felt like Bart Simpson being choked by Homer Simpson. I was like, and they would release it, and they would go. And then they said something like, only 20 more minutes until we're done, and then you can get your settlement check. Acting as if like there was no footage or evidence before, and like they were just doing this as a formality to get me my money that was owed to me. they did that a few times. I was running around the cell like, no, 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 no. And like a few times people popped their heads through the window and they're like, I don't see anyone in there with you. And the weird thing is like when people talk like that to a crazy person, it's harder to distinguish between someone that's trying to just be nice to a crazy person versus someone that knows what's going on and is pretending not to. It's almost indistinguishable between those two. So basically I was being choked. My throat was seizing up. I was like, ah, and I kept running around the cell. Like, no, 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 stop, stop, stop. And this, I don't know how long it went on. It felt like forever, but it's probably like 20 minutes. And eventually, like, I fell asleep. I think I told him, and then after I fell asleep, all of a sudden I'm woken up to the door opening and 3 guards come in there and a medical staff, 2 or 3 guards come in there with the medical staff, or 2 and 2, I can't remember. And they brought this chair in there. And I was like, no, 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 I'll do anything, please, no, no. And like they put me in the chair and they cuffed me in there and they put this mask over me. And I was like, I kept trying to like pull it down because I was like, there was no need for that. It's like, why would, if there's someone, even if they were crazy, that was settled down and sleeping in a cell, why would you run in there and traumatize them and basically assault them and strap them to the chair and then inject them with something? I was bawling after that. I was so violated all over again after already being violated again. I don't know what they injected me with. But it sucked. Eventually I got transported somewhere else. I got to Travis County Correctional Complex, HSB Unit C, I think. It's the one that looks like medical, but it's not medical. They have those raised beds that almost look like an exam table. Then they moved me to HSB, which is where like they taper you down. That's just like the kind of crazy. It's a mix of crazy people and not crazy people. They put too many not crazy people in there. And then I got moved to and while I was in HSB Unit B, I was in a cell with 4 people. Not all the time, but there were 4 beds. Sometimes they were all occupied. They told me that I was going to meet Micah, a friend of mine, who was part of like their narratives too. Like he was that they spun into the narratives while I was at the Grove. He was one of the very few people, one of like 2 or 3 people that came over to my place at the Grove, and he knew somewhat what I was going through, and I think he was going through something similar as well to some degree. And lo and behold, when I got moved to Building 12, Unit C. I was basically I was 1 bed away, one cell away from the bed that I was in a year prior. I don't think that was a coincidence. And then lo and behold, when I walk in there and carry my bed up there, Micah runs up to me and I hugged him and I was like, oh my God. That was my arrest. They planted drugs on me and forced me into a slow speed car chase, which is really the only thing I ever am guilty of in all my charges, but with reason, because of this nonsense. All my criminal charges would be dropped if this came out. And it sucks that not a single one of them will tell the truth, and that they would rather be on the side of, they would rather be in that little box of worst people in the entire world, most cruel people in the entire world, the dumbest people in the entire world. And they're torturing me while I'm doing this whole time. There literally feels like someone's punching me almost in the kidneys, a little bit below the kidneys. I don't have any back issues. I didn't sleep in my back wrong. There's nothing wrong with my neck or my back right now. If I do this, I can feel it on my hand and my forearm.